Hi folks, welcome to this webinar. We are very glad to have you here. So this webinar is through Redundancy and Beyond Rights, Support and Building a Stronger Workplace at FinTrU. So we're not only covering information about redundancies, we know there's been a number throughout the year in FinTrU and mentions of there being some more in the future. So we'll also be covering what the union can do to improve your workplace for those who remain in FinTrU. We know there's a huge amount of people working there who care about their work and want to see the company do well, and we are a great partner to help improve a workplace. So there's two of us presenting today, myself, Maeve Richardson, who's a digital organiser. I may have contacted you on LinkedIn at some point, most likely, and I'm joined by Gareth Murphy, who is the Head of Industrial Relations and Campaigns in the Financial Services Union. He has vast experience in the industrial relations world and has seen it all in terms of workplaces and improving them. So we're going to move on. I'm going to hand you over to Gareth.
Okay, how's it going? And very welcome, everyone. So yeah, I want to talk through a little bit about the redundancy process that unfortunately is happening in FinTrU and maybe give some tips on how to make it a little bit better, what to look for, what to ask for, what your statutory rights are, but also maybe what you should expect beyond just the statutory minimum, and then talk a little bit more about what the union can do more generally in FinTrU, as Maeve said, to improve working conditions. So look, redundancies may occur in workplaces for a range of reasons. Sometimes there's new technology being implemented. Sometimes there's just cutting costs from the employer. Other times a business could be moving or closing. Or, for example, there could be loss of clients, loss of customers, that lead to the company deciding to pursue redundancies. But what's really, really important is that the redundancies themselves are explained, rationalized, and evidenced to the workers themselves who are faced by it, so everyone can understand, see, and more importantly, challenge whether the redundancies are real or not. It's very important to note that it's the role itself that needs to be made redundant, as opposed to you as an individual. So the rationale for the redundancies needs to be based on the roles no longer existing, as opposed to them just wanting to get rid of you or your colleague. So that's important. You can move on to the next slide. Thanks. So there is both individual and collective redundancies, and they both can have two separate processes. So we're going to focus more on the collective side. So just very briefly, if there's fewer than 20 employees over a period of time, that will often be handled as an individual redundancy. If there's more than 20, again, over a period of time, then that's considered a collective redundancy. And that's where the employer has a legal obligation to collectively consult on the nature of the redundancies, the number of redundancies, and what will happen to people during that redundancy process. So our understanding is it is a collective process in FinTrU, although there may have been some individual ones as well at different periods of time. So the collective one is really, really important. So employers should consult if there's a recognized trade union. For example, what we're fighting to achieve in FinTrU is FSU to be the recognized union. If that was the case, they'd have to actually consult and negotiate and collectively bargain with that recognized trade union. But where there isn't a recognized trade union, which is FinTrU at the moment, they just need to consult with employee reps. So the consultation should, and I say should, give employees an opportunity to actually influence the process. It's not considered a negotiation, so the employer just has to consult with a view to reaching agreement. Doesn't mean they actually have to reach an agreement or that they have to compromise, but obviously employee reps should be trying to get them to compromise and make changes. And the consultation It really does have to be proper and legitimate, and for those redundancies to be considered fair. So, where there's no recognized union, employees should elect their representatives, and that election should be fair and it should be of the affected employees. So, where their elections have happened, then the employee reps meet. They usually will get a little bit of training. Not dissimilar to this, although without the trade union influence, but they'll get a little bit of training on what your rights under the law are. And I think those rights are very important. But like I said, I'll also suggest maybe what people should be seeking and asking for beyond just statutory minimums. So, in an individual consultation, uh, it usually means that the employer is speaking to the individual themselves about their own individual specific situation. So that might be why they've been selected for redundancy, whether some alternatives exist, and then what the kind of time frame and process looks like. In a collective consultation, it should also include avoiding redundancies. So, what measures are being taken to avoid the redundancy? Are there ways in which the overall number of redundancies can be reduced? How the employer should lessen the impact on affected employees, and that could include, for example, redundancy terms. So, what exit terms people will get if they are ultimately be made redundant. And if the employer does not engage in collective consultation or doesn't address the points they have to during the collective consultation or ignores the issues that are raised by the employee reps, then that can be challenged legally and it can be considered to have not been a fair or reasonable collective consultation, and therefore the redundancies not be fair if they happen. So, just in terms of selection for redundancy, employers should use a fair and objective selective selection process. This should primarily be based on the roles that are impacted by the redundancy. But then when you identify the role, it will come down to selecting individuals. So let's say, for example, 10 of the same role have been identified as in a pool for redundancy, but actually the proposal is only to reduce that 10 from 10 to 5. They then have to have an objective and fair process to identify who are the 5 and who are not the 5 at risk. So, for example, it can't just pick people that they don't like and say, you are the 5 exiting. And they need to have some objective criteria around performance ratings, maybe skills and qualifications, maybe length of service, although even length of service has been challenged in recent years around potential age discrimination. So length of service can be a risky enough one for employers to use. But effectively, they have to have some criteria. They'll often have 3 or 4 criteria and then have a weighted based point system. If people feel that they have been selected unfairly, they have a right to appeal that selection within the consultation period of time and challenge their points scoring, for example. Let's say they scored low on qualifications when actually they have above and beyond the qualifications required for the role. They'd have an opportunity to challenge that. Okay, so redundancy selection can be unfair if it's discriminatory. So some of the reasons that they can't use in terms of objective criteria would be, whoever is on maternity leave, we're going to let them go. That's obviously immediately discriminatory and unfair and an absolute no-no. But there's other ones that would be protected and covered as well. For example, if someone has recently made a protected disclosure and they're going through what's often called a whistleblowing process, well then they're protected from being selected for redundancy on the basis that they have made a protected disclosure. So there are some of the reasons there that can't be used or shouldn't be used in any selection process. So notice periods, people are entitled to statutory minimums in terms of their notice. So after the consultation period and process is over, unfortunately, some people can be selected for redundancy and then serve notice of redundancy. And up on the screen there is some of the statutory minimum notice periods. But to be honest, often now people will actually have a notice period written into their contract of employment. So you should probably have a look at your contract of employment to see what notice applies to you, should you be served notice of your employer, because it's often a little bit beyond what your statutory entitlement is. So, what should the employee reps in particular look for in the redundancy consultation process? And this is some of the things that might be beyond your statutory entitlement. So, you're not legally entitled to some of these things, but you should look for them. So, for example, put forward proposals to reduce redundancies. And some of the things you can do in that area is demand that the employer make available other roles, inquire as to the employer's business model. Is there new contracts, clients, projects, works coming on stream in a reasonable period of time, whereby with a little bit of retraining, you'd actually have a role in, say, 6 months' time? That's some of the areas people should look at. They should also consider job sharing, reduced hours, all, going from full-time work to part-time work, etc., all as a way of avoiding potential job losses. And then one thing that we as a union negotiate in all of the banks and all of the areas that were collectively recognised is a voluntary led approach first. So before an employer ever considers compulsory redundancies, that they actually ask, does anyone want to go? And they put out an agreed set of redundancy terms and ask people, would they like to go? We find that in most employments, for a wide range of reasons, there's actually people who would volunteer to leave that organization. Maybe they want to go traveling, maybe they have a potential of getting another job, and this voluntary severance might help them bridge that gap. Many reasons, but we always find that there will be a pool of people actually who'd like to go, and that can be really helpful in trying to avoid compulsory redundancies. So people should really push for a voluntary led approach. Obviously, try and improve the redundancy terms. So your employee reps or individual members should be asking for more money, to put it bluntly. That money is to help compensate you for your loss of job and also to act as a bridging gap between when you leave this employment and find a new role. So the more money you can get, the more time you have to actually find new employment and also compensate you. Likewise, the more money you can get in terms of the redundancy terms, the more likelihood that people will volunteer or at least not be too sad or disappointed about exiting the organization. So redundancy terms are really important in any consultation process. Another way of doing that is actually to have longer exit dates. So if you can push exit dates out, you're actually still getting paid an income and you still have time to look for another job. So while it may not be built into the redundancy terms themselves, actually by having a longer exit date, you're effectively increasing your income during that period of time and giving you more time to look for other employment. And during the consultation, the employer really should be answering questions, and there should be enough time to engage and ask questions and get answers, so that you're not just met once at the beginning and then maybe met 2 weeks later, and next thing the 30 days or the 90 days is up. So really, really important that today's event is not only about redundancies, it's also about those people who will avoid redundancy or stay working in FinTrU post redundancies. As a union, we not only want to help people get the best they can during this difficult time of redundancies, but we want to be able to create a workplace where workers can raise concerns safely, can have more transparency in the workplace, and can influence change in the future before it happens. And the best way to do that is to unionize your workplace, organize your workplace, and get FSU in as your union. So talking to colleagues. Um, some of the areas that we do just to contrast maybe a non-union workplace with some of our organized workplace. In non-union workplaces, pay, terms and conditions are decided unilaterally by management. Changes are announced unilaterally, and everyone has to adapt to those changes. And the return to office rules are just imposed without any consultation. Whereas in a union workplace, pay and terms are negotiated every year. We collectively bargain pay, and then members vote on whether they accept the pay increase or not. If they accept the pay increase, it's paid. If they reject it, we tell the employer they've rejected, and we try to get more money, or we go to the Labour Court or other LRA institutions to try to get more money for our members. Likewise, in unionised employment, policies are not implemented unilaterally, or where they are, we're able to then negotiate them and change them and campaign on them over time. So, for example, the return to office being a great example where employers imposed changes, and then we were able to make them slightly better through our negotiating and organising processes that happened. Again, workplace without a union, promotion and progression can often feel unclear and unfair. Redundancy information just comes from the company only. You don't have people guiding you and advising you through that process. And speaking up can often feel very risky. With the workplace, staff push for more transparent processes. Promotions are advertised, people interview, there's objective criteria, so it's a lot fairer. And obviously, we provide our members individual support and guidance throughout all of these processes. And ultimately, strength comes from numbers. The more members you have in the union, the stronger you are, the more you're able to negotiate and get from your employer. Just some of the things we've won in workplaces relevant to yourselves. So and this year, we negotiated a 5.2% increase in Danske Bank, as well as improving some of the minimum rates of the grades in Danske Bank, which is really important. In NatWest, in a situation not dissimilar to yourselves in terms of job losses, we were able to save 150 jobs in Ulster Bank, Northern Ireland, that were at risk because of the closure of Ulster Bank in the Republic of Ireland. We were able to save 150 jobs by working with NatWest to source some of their employment into Belfast that saved some of our members their jobs. We've also fought and secured vouchers, cost of living vouchers, and a number of banks across the island of Ireland over the last 2 or 3 years, which has helped workers with some of the inflationary crisis and cost of living crisis that we've suffered. We also speak up on things like technology. So we secured our first AI agreement in Bank of Ireland. And what that says is Bank of Ireland have to consult and engage and negotiate with FSU on all introductions of AI. They have to provide training for staff, and they have to provide a long-term forecasting about which roles are likely to be impacted by AI. That gives people time to actually train. And vitally importantly, Bank of Ireland committed to no compulsory redundancies and only voluntary severance, which is a really, really strong commitment, particularly as we face into all of the technological changes that are coming down the line. Just some other areas that we've worked on. We've done a lot of work on promoting more equal workplaces. and family-friendly and gender-based policies. So we secured the first ever domestic violence workplace policy in Danske Bank, that was really well received by people in difficult, very difficult circumstances. We've also secured menopause and menstrual policies in a number of employments, as well as health allowances across virtually all of the banks. Maternity pay is fully paid in our banks, and we've improved paternity and parents' leave in a number of employments. So why join? Why join FSU? Because we'll work with you to improve work at FinTrU, your working lives at FinTrU. We're independent, so we are not in any way associated or attached to FinTrU. Our union is a democratic trade union, so our leadership is elected. And every 3 years at conferences, our members vote on policies that become our priority that we then campaign on and work to achieve. And in your own workplace, we'll be establishing and are working to establish a FinTrU committee. That's a committee of workers who will decide exactly what they want and what we'll work towards achieving in FinTrU. So it's an absolutely democratic, independent organization that provides you professional support at work. So we also provide support to individual members. We have an advice centre with a number of our staff working on phone lines and emails and to answer individual members' queries. So we provide a lot of individual support should they have a problem or challenge at work. That can often be formal processes, but it can often be just a small bit of advice and guidance to navigate a tricky situation at work that never has to go formal because of the advice that you've received. And then obviously when there are major restructures, we support our members through those things, as well as lodging pay claims every single year to improve paying conditions. So really, really important that all FinTrU staff join FSU. So on that note, any questions? And I'll hand back to my colleague Maeve.
Hi folks, I hope you found that informative. You can submit questions via the chat or via the Q&A function. We know there's a number of you experiencing various situations within FinTrU, whether you've been told you're being affected by organizational optimization or whether you're in the talent pool waiting for a project. We're here to support you and to give you any information that can help you. But the most important thing is that you join FSU and you ask your colleagues to join. We'll be circulating the recording of this event as well, so that you can share it with your colleagues and show them how we can make a better workplace within FinTrU. We'll give people a moment to submit questions. You can scan the QR code there if you'd like to join. So someone has asked, hi, thanks for this. What would be a realistic pathway for FSU to become the recognised union of FinTrU look like? So would you like to take that, Gareth?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Thanks. So the positive position for workers in Northern Ireland is there is legislation to allow for a trade union to become recognised and to collectively bargain. And there's two pathways to that. If you have over 50% in a bargaining unit in membership, so that might be particular grades in FinTrU, maybe excluding senior managers, let's say, particular grades in FinTrU. If we have 50% plus one in trade union membership, then we are automatically entitled to be the recognised trade union. However, if you don't get to 50% and you have over 10% in membership, you can then achieve a ballot for union recognition. And that ballot would be everyone in the bargaining unit that you've defined getting a vote on whether they want to be collectively represented by the union or not. So basically, there is a legal pathway based on numbers to actually secure trade union recognition. That's why it's really, really important that people do join. And if we can build that membership up, like I said, ideally over 50% within a particular bargaining unit, But if it's below 50, we have another mechanism to achieve union recognition and collective bargaining. The other positive is that the relevant minister in Stormont is bringing forward the Good Jobs Bill initiative, which, if that passes the Assembly, it'll make it much easier for workers, number one, to join a trade union, but also it'll lower thresholds for actually achieving union recognition. So there is good laws there now that provide a pathway, but actually, if some new laws come into place in the next year, it'll be a lot easier for workers. So really the message is join, get colleagues to join, and you have a legal pathway to achieving a union at work.
So whether you're in Analyst 1 or whether you're Senior Associate or anything in between, look at your trusted colleagues and have a talk with them about joining up and creating a strong union and having a say in your workplace. I can just see some people are typing, so we'll wait for further questions. But we know that many of the issues have been across all of the grades. A lot of you have witnessed this kind of shift in culture within FinTrU over the past 2 years, from a workplace that a lot of you really loved to a more stringent banking culture in a way. And this is your avenue to push back and have your say in the workplace and to have an impact and to make it better for you. Okay, we just got a response. Great, thank you for the answer. We'll definitely be joining. If we have no further questions, we might wrap up. I will put my email in the chat so you can get in contact. I put the join link in there alongside our website, and I'll be putting in the information for everything we referred to legally and where we got that from. If you have any questions, feel free to get in contact, and we hope to see you join the union alongside your colleagues.